Okay, welcome to the river. And big Shabbat Shalom to everyone, wherever you may be in the world. It's so nice to see so many of you gathering here with us live. And for those that will gather on video, a big welcome to you as well. We are going to look now at some of the foundational series as it relates to us as a wider body and also more specifically as a community. And so we've just gone through the book of First Timothy, and Michael took us through a foundational series in relationship to just the body, what the early Kahal, the early ecclesia, the church experienced almost 2,000 years ago. And so Michael took us through that. He did a great job. And it's one of these things where we're to be reminded that there are those who have gone before us, and we stand on the shoulders of the giants of the servitude of the body of Messiah. And we are all here because of them. And his Ruach and his spirit and truth and those who have served before us. And so we're on the bookends. We're on the final completion of this part of the age. And so it's up to all of us to bring to cross the line, to finish the race, and to bring this home as we prepare for the coming of Messiah. So this is one of those series that's gonna kick us a little bit in the backside, as we're reminded of the things that we are to be and not to be, and we've got honor and shame as something for us to consider as we look at this series. One of the things as a part of all of this, we're going to look at the why, the how, the what of discipleship and how it's expressing itself in the sense of the community and the wider body at this time. And so one of the ways that we need to think about is the why of this, and what is this honor and shame? What is it that we are to be as disciples? And to be in discipleship. And so these are the things that will challenge us in many ways. But a lot of us don't consider that the servitude or discipleship, his body, this matter of the covenant where we are to not take his name in vain, and how that relates to our actual character, our own personal behavior, and how this plays out with how he considers honor and shame. And so we're just going to start the series with just reflecting on that, and essentially to take a look in the mirror and to get the sense of the why. Why does this matter to the Father, and how does this reflect not only in our walk but our coming judgment seat with Messiah in honor and shame? So we will look at that today, and then we'll go on to look at how that actually plays out for us in a community sense, and then we're going to finish the series with the weightier matter, where this is all going. Why are we experiencing this in the test, and why does it matter to him as a part of his great plan of redemption? Because there's something very exciting coming, and some of us touched on that last week as a part of the Q&A, and so it does get very exciting. So this is the part of the meal that and you look at a plate, and you see the things you like on the plate when you sit down for a meal. And sometimes there might be something on the plate that's kind of like, well, I know I need to eat that, but I'm not sure I really want to. Sometimes not everything tastes like honey. And so this is kind of one of those things where we're going to eat a bit of the thing that the Father has set before us on the table, and look at some things as it relates to us. And some of the things we need to think about. And so the lens or the perspective that we're doing that from is honor and shame. And to sort of see, why does this matter to him? And what is this not taking his name in vain? What is this, the purpose of discipleship, the witness that we are as a body? I'm going to start off here, and I've got accuser of the brethren. Now, this is a very interesting thing here. This is a quote that's often attributed to Socrates. He was, considered obviously one of the great influential philosophers of the time, and leading up before the time of Messiah. But one of the things that that is often credited to him is this quote. Now, there's not really evidence of that historically, and so we don't really know where this quote came from, but Socrates seems to get the credit for it. But what we've got here, essentially, is he's saying when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the losers. And slander brings often these ad hominems or personal attacks or things that when we are confronted with things that we don't want to hear or that we don't like, or we've got to look in the mirror, if we choose to go down the shame path, the path of pride, we will often turn to slander. And slander is more of a modern English expression of we actually will turn our accusations upon the one who is saying it. In other words, we'll shoot the messenger. And so this is one of these things where basically, whether Socrates had said this or not, it's basically reflecting that we will shoot the messenger. We will attack the one saying something that we don't want to hear or don't agree with. And this is a part of our prideful human nature. And this all links into honor and shame. Look, nothing new. Rome is simply lost at this time. What comes before the fall of an empire is pride. And it doesn't matter whether that pride is coming on whatever political spectrum, left, right, liberal, conservative, all this kind of stuff that we get caught up with in this Roman existence that is going on across the world. It's lost its way. All honor and shame culture is regarding basic healthy human behavior is completely being redefined and disregarded at this time in the modern West and Europe. And what we are seeing is society is breaking down because it no longer understands honor and shame. It no longer cares to. It's redefining it. It's disregarding it. And of course, we are seeing this play out from the breakdown of the family nucleus right through to the behavior that we're seeing in the politics, what we're seeing happen in societal functions, respect for authority. Every aspect we are seeing now is breaking down in society. And so we're basically seeing that pride is coming before this fall. It always does. And again, we are witnessing this unfolding live across the earth at this time. And so this is why we are to pray for the leaders at this time. They are facing this, and whether they are perpetrating it or trying to come up against it themselves, they're essentially dealing with the fallen human condition, iniquity, and this prideful position that is coming forth. And so we're struggling at this time as we come to the fall of mankind. In the sense of our very nefesh, our behavior, our reactions, and it's getting quite ugly out there. And I know for a lot of us, we'd be watching the news right now and just be going, wow, look at the behavior that is occurring across the face of the earth. It's staggering. That we have walked away from his ways. And so this is not about choosing and picking sides of Rome struggling. And Rome is my euphemism for those outside the house. It's the thing that has us in bondage at this time. They do not know the Father's wisdom and ways. And so we see this expressing itself on both sides of this political spectrum. So we have this going on, and we're all in bondage to it. And we're all amongst it. And so there's going to be a witness that comes forth, a light from us or not, as those outside the house continue to struggle. I've got here, wisdom brings honor. And I'm just going to read from the Proverbs here, 3:35. The wise will inherit honor, but the fool's disgrace or shame. Now, the context of this dishonor will bring a harsh covenant judgment seat regarding those who are of the faith. And so what this is saying, and this is a statement, I believe, the appointed times, the Moedim, a bridal governance statement. And unless we know the framework of his appointed times, his plan of redemption, we'll often read something like the Proverbs and not understand that what we're seeing here is the end result of a judgment that is coming for all of us. And we either inherit the kingdom with honor, or we will go down the foolish path of disgrace or shame. and all of us set before us. So we can look at Rome all we want, but Rome is not our standard. Our standard is the King. Our standard is Messiah. And so we don't get to use Rome as the judgment stick and say, well, we're better than them at least. It's got nothing to do with them. We are currently amongst this. We are to come out of her. We are to be the citizenship of the kingdom from heaven. And so as a part of that, we often look at what we're seeing on the TV and we think, okay, well, that's my standard. I'm doing better than that. But that's not our standard. And so today we're going to be reminded a little bit of, it's not Rome we're to look to as how to not behave. We are to look to Messiah as to what is honorable and shameful in his eyes. And it's for us to keep our focus on Messiah now. Yes, all this craziness is happening around us, but we must look in our own house and to understand that this proverb is to us, for us. And this is what it is about. We are not going to be taking Rome to the judgment seat with us when we stand before Messiah. Not what it did, how it looked at things, its own folly, all of those sorts of things. We need to look in the house now. And we need to understand as a part of doing that, all of us will stand before Messiah and we will experience honor or shame as a result. And so this can be sobering. And so this is why we have to go here and to think about this in our own walk in the sense of the body, and then how that plays out in the sense of even our own community within the body. Okay, so the mirror of our walk. What do we really look like? Now, of course, everyone knows as part of this community that the great servitude example of the beast of burden, the donkey. And donkeys can be a bit of a wild ass, or they can be a very well-trained servant. And we are going to see this transformation in us from being in one place to another so that we can be fit for service. All of this relates, as you've seen many times in the teachings before, that this comes down to responsibility, accountability, and consequences, all of which, of course, in our Roman bondage perspective, they're losing the spectrum. Responsibility, accountability, and consequence is collapsing in society around us. But we are to take his ways. These are his ways, and his ways bring us right through the framework of how we're to look at the faith, of taking a responsibility and understanding of our faith to be accountable for that, and of course the consequences that come with it. And we get this shadow picture in this test, in this time domain, to basically grapple with these main principles that sit behind the faith. And we often want to hide behind knowledge or the latest little interesting thing that we have and stuff, and not look at the actual responsibility, accountability, and consequence of our own walk. And so this is what we're doing today, is we're going to be willing to do this as a community. And why do we do this as a community? Because we are commanded to. It is a part of repentance. Repent. This place of living in a place of teshuvah or teshuva. And so we need to shuv, to turn to him. Repentance is not stop doing our bad things. Repentance is turning to him and to start doing it his way, because he's going to weigh us up in the balance with honor or shame as a part of what we did in our walk. There's very few messages I know that could be more important than the application of something. We have the sovereign choice to receive and give honor and or shame. And this is what's contained in the scripture. Approximately 40% of the New Testament is dealing with matters of behavior. Why such a detailed focus on how we go about things? Now we have the Torah. We have the proclamation of it and the warnings by the prophets. And then we have this thing we call the New Testament, or the Brit Hadashah, which is the application of what the early Kahal, ecclesia, or church did in both spirit and truth. The three of these things given to us make up this thing we call the Bible. We have the standard of his righteousness. We have the proclamation and the warning of the prophets. And then we have the application of what this actually looks like by his people. And over the last 2 days, or the last days, The last 2,000 years, this application has got us to this point. There's always been a remnant that has understood the things that we are talking about today and has taken the responsibility to be willing to look at it, just like many of you who are gathered here today. Having the faith is 2/3 of the matters, to understand the warnings and the Torah and his righteousness, what's contained in it. But how we go applying it, this 1/3, matters. And so this conversation of honor and shame today is the application of these things. What is going on? And indeed, the whole series that we'll do, and of course, what we've been through with 1 Timothy and the challenges that the early Kahal faced. The English definition of shame, a painful emotion caused by awareness. Now, this is interesting. Having done something wrong or foolish. So there's an awareness of something, and it's emotionally, we're going to emotionally experience this. Now, emotions are something that the Father has given to us to experience, that temperature gauge. But our emotions don't necessarily, in and of themselves, equal truth or untruth. It means that we are experiencing something. So if we're experiencing shame, we could be experiencing shame on something that is actually not true, but we might believe that it is, or we're experiencing shame because we know it is true. And so these are the things that we're going to experience this. The same way is said for honor. This is high respect and is shown for special merit, recognition, or esteem, great privilege, good reputation. So this is the other side of it in this basic English human understanding of these things. So an awareness of something we've done wrong, or we're experiencing the emotion of something that we are doing that is right. And so the very concept of honor and shame in modern culture has been lost. People are trying to redefine, disregard, and be disrespectful to one another as a result. The Hebrew definitions that we're going to look at that go around these main aspects of this human relationship. Now, there's many things to look at when we look at honor in the Hebrew sense and shame. But we're going to look at it for the sake of this series from the basic point of human interaction, in the sense of how do we go about this in a discipleship, a body, an interaction type of way. And so the Hebrew that we're going to look at referring to honor really is this kavod. And this is glory, honor, and abundance. So there's something that's going on here, and it can relate to religious splendor, glory, but dignity, reputation, and reverence is one of the things that the kavod expresses. And the root of this, the kavod, is very interesting because this now starts to relate to weights and measures. In sense of the lens or the perspective that we're going to look at honor and shame through. And so I want you to think about this. It's saying that this is something to be heavy, it's weighty. It's something that denotes this sense of a weighty matter. And so this is expressed often in Scripture in the sense of, in the weights and measures, as gold. And so this very, very heavy type of metal is the shadow picture, the way that he wants us to relate to it, this precious metal of gold. And then, of course, it relates to being rich and in the sense and honorable and glorious and burdensome, to be honored, to be made heavy, to enjoy that honor, to actually gain glory, to be caused to be honored, to make oneself heavy, to make oneself dense, to make oneself numerous. There's an actual multiplication of this. Now, this is interesting because in the Hebrew, in the kavod here, it's suggesting that there is actually ownership that we have as a part of receiving honor. In other words, that we're going to bring in something in our own sovereign choices that actually can bring honor upon us as bestowed by the Master. And so I want you to think of this in weights and measures in that sense, okay? There's going to be a balancing of the scales. principles. And is the shame heavier in our life, or is the honor heavier in our life? And you see that he'll actually reflect this in gold. And indeed, we see this great shadow pictures of how important gold was in the temple and things like that. And so there's sort of all these kind of pictures that we're given to get a sense of where this is all heading, and it will relate ultimately to our judgment seat, which we're going to talk a lot more in part 3 about before Messiah. On the shame side, we've got the kalima, in the Hebrew, the disgrace, the reproach, the shame. This can often bring confusion, dishonor, insult, reproach in our lives. And so against and the understanding of the standard of his righteousness, we will see that these are the things that we can experience as a part of this, okay? And so he's designed us to experience things emotionally for a reason, but they aren't the things we're making decisions on, they're just the awareness. And this goes for both honor and shame. And then we've got the kalam here in Hebrew, the root of this is to insult, shame, humiliate, okay? To actually bring about, to experience being humiliated, dishonored, confounded, to exhibit shame, to be insulted. Now, this is interesting. Why is shame something that the Father would allow us to experience? You know, we all like the honor bit and all that sort of thing, but why does he want us to actually experience this place where we will actually feel that I've done something wrong? I'm not actually doing something that is honorable in his eyes. And so the opposite of what is honorable to him, that brings honor to us and to his name, is going to be the opposite of that, is shame. And we will start to experience that. And so is this waiting in our lives, in our behavior? Why is so much of the New Testament actually about our behavior in exercising the faith? And so this is something that is often missed now. And the Greek definition of this, or the equivalence of this, and in the Greek, they actually, there's 8 or 9 different types of ways that it expresses certain aspects of shame and honor to try and get across these same principles. But the equivalence of these in the Greek is the entrepo, to shame, to be ashamed, reverence, to turn about. We're going to see that it is the antimia, dishonor, disgrace, without honor, to dishonor, and to be dishonored. So we receive and do both. And this brings us into less esteem. And then we have as a part of this, the achahone, the confusion that can come with this. Often when we're learning and trying to understand truth, we can experience this when we're being ashamed. Why did this happen to me? How is this happening to me? And so we get this sense of this feeling of disgrace and everything else. But what is interesting when you get into this aspect of the Greek, it also goes to disfigurement. So we're being disfigured. Now, this is interesting because our King, our Messiah, literally experienced being disfigured before he was put on the ancient Tav. There is a place of where the honorable can actually receive shame. And they're not receiving shame because it's something that they deserve. It's actually they're being shamed by that which is shameful. And so we saw this actually happen to the Master, and he was disfigured before that blood and that price was paid on the ancient Tav, or the ancient cross. We see in the honor, we're going to see this tamei. And so the valuing by which the price is fixed. So what was actually happening is he's being shamed by the religious leaders at that time and being put in the ancient Tav. We see this playing out, that there's a price that comes with being honored. So this is quite interesting when we think of this in our faith walk, that we would actually go through a fixed price. What is going on to receive, or the ability to receive, honor? And so this is something that we don't often consider, that I need to pay a price to experience this place of honor. And we kind of like the honor without the heavy lifting, don't we? This is something that we tend to do. We kind of We kind of don't want to do the hard yards, but we want all the reward without doing the hard yards. And this is a part of our human fallen condition to try and take the easy path or the easy road, the wide road. Honor belongs to, so of honor, of which one to reason. But what's interesting of this can also relate to reason of rank, servitude, reverence. So it's attached to this place. The timeo here in Greek, to estimate a fixed value, think weights and measures again, for the value of something belonging to oneself, to honor, to revere, to venerate. So think in this weights of measure terms. Is there something in this honor side of the weights and measure, this being weighed in the balance, where actually this fixed value and price starts to come upon how we're being looked at in honor and shame as a part of the faith and as a part of what we do with our faith. And then we've got the timios here, of great price, precious, held in honor, esteemed, especially dear. So we're going to see these definitions play out as we look at the Brit Hadashah and how it's expressed in the Greek. Okay, the shaming the honor of others. This is something that King David experienced. And he's saying something here, oh man, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? So he's literally experiencing something from a seat or rank of office. And he's actually being shamed as a part of that servitude. Now, this is a very serious position. He's crying out here, to be turned into shame. How long will you love words and seek after lies? Who are they listening to that would bring this upon him? But know that Yah has set apart the godly for himself. So he's making this point. You can do this, but know that Yah hears and calls to him. And he's saying, be angry and do not miss the mark or sin. Ponder your own hearts. Ponder your own hearts on your beds. When you sleep at night, be silent, Salah. And look at this, offer right sacrifices and put your trust in awe as a part of some of the shame that we may experience, which is not right, and what is being put across and put upon our lives, especially when we try to serve others and we're trying to help others and they're unable to receive that. And so they turn to a place of slander. They turn to a place where they actually can become the accuser of the brethren. And we can experience this in our faith journey. Many of you have tried to help or serve another brother or sister and have actually experienced this. And what the point that we're seeing here in this honor and shame, and the kavod is being used here, and the kalima, and what we're actually seeing here is it ends with offer right sacrifices. So regardless of what is occurring to you, offer these right sacrifices. When we don't do this, and we experience shame and we don't offer the right sacrifices, this can lead to violence and murder. There's actually the actual picture of this when we see Cain and Abel. And Cain did not bring the right sacrifices to the Father. And we saw the shame that was experienced by Cain. And how did it play out in Cain? He didn't have control of his emotions. He was not understanding the true principles of honor and shame. And as a result of that, he struck out at his brother. And it actually ended in murder. And we can do this just in our relationships in the body. When we experience somebody trying to give us reproof or correction or whatever it is we're going through, our pride can rise up. And the reaction to this is not a right sacrifice. It's not a repentant position. We will choose, even in some cases, to do violence to our brethren. And even if that's not physical murder, we can murder our brothers and sisters spiritually as we bring upon and towards them. And so we don't wish to be a part of this type of behavior. So why does my behavior matter when it comes to honor and shame? Because this is the why of it all. If we, again, keep the theme of the balance, the measure of what is going on here with honor and shame, is it possible that our behavior is directly related to how our bema seat or our judgment seat of Messiah will be? How he will look at the honor and shame of our walk in the faith? Our actual walk, how did we represent him? And the Proverbs here in 25:27 goes on to say, it is not good to eat much honey, nor is it glorious to seek one's own glory. Now, this is interesting because what the concern here is that we're going to eat the stuff we like on the plate. And as a result, we could actually seek our own glory. We're not looking in the mirror. We're not able to reflect and look at what is my position in honor and shame before the master, before him, because that's going to reflect then how it plays out in the whole body. This is ultimately a heart matter, and it directly relates to the pride of life. We got something interesting. It's contained here. I got from Luke 14:11, and this is actually Messiah's giving the parable of the wedding feast. Now, we're going to get a bit more into this in part 3. There's some interesting things that lead up to this, but it says, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. And he that will humble himself, he who will humble himself will be exalted. Now, this is an interesting thing that Messiah is trying to get across to us. When we sit in a place where we are in a shame position, we will often tend to try and defend ourselves. We will try to exalt ourselves. We will try to justify ourselves. And we don't want to be in a position, especially if it comes to matters of reproof and correction, discipline. The discipleship, the disciplined ones, they will be able to receive things or eat the things on the plate that aren't just honey. They'll be able to receive the things that will bring about the ability to humble themselves. And those that are willing to do that are going to experience honor from the King, that he will exalt them. And it's interesting how Messiah attached this to the wedding feast. And again, we'll go into this a bit more in part 3. And of course, we do the shadow picture of that every year with Sukkot, and we're celebrating the wedding feast of Messiah as a part of his appointed times. It is all related to honor and shame. Okay, so honor and shame, this weight in the balance, the traditional scales and balance is an international symbol of justice. That's normally how we see it. But in day-to-day lives, in ancient times, this was actually the value or quantity of a thing which was determined by the weighing of the scales. So what is this? Weight and measure rather than our modern currency-based systems and legal systems. So weights and measures in ancient concept or thinking was, how are the scales being balanced here? Okay. The shekel was not originally a unit of money, but a weight according to the price and the quantity of things to be determined. The yoke of oxen or the yoke of bondage, this beam of balance which was set between the two oxen that would work the fields, resembled the crossbeam which joined these oxen. And the English translation of a pair of scales in the Greek, the zugon here, literally means yoke. So we're actually going to experience his yoke in this journey upon us as we look at honor and shame. And because he took it upon himself, we've got a chance now to be a part of the honor or the shame. He has balanced the scales, and we now have a sovereign choice in all of this. And we'll talk about this a bit more. We see this actually appear. It's interesting in the third horse of the four seals mentioned in the book of Revelation of the rider and horse, and he's holding a pair of balances in his hands. And it's interesting how this relates to the price or the cost of living. There's also a greater weightier matter on this that can relate to the cost and the price of our spiritual journey. The scales were common marketplace items. And what's interesting is Elohim demanded that they be used justly. And we will see this in the Torah, in the Proverbs, in the prophets, and in the Brit Hadashah. Are we balancing these justly? And do we do this with each other? Now, what is interesting is these scales, could be used in fraudulent manners and manipulated. And we see this. And in the book of Hosea, it actually talks about this fraudulent use. And so we can fraudulently bring shame or claim honor fraudulently as we do this as a body. Or we need to experience the understanding of shame and honor, which is not fraudulent, but it's a weight, a measurement, be it just or unjust. And so we see this. What is interesting is often in Scripture, Elohim himself is envisioned in holding the scales. And so he looks at it this way, and he looks at honor and shame this way. Yah weighs the spirits, for Yah, the Elohim of knowledge, his actions are weighed. Let me be weighed in just balance. The Elohim may know my integrity. And then Job cried this out. You're seeing this right throughout scriptures. The Father is looking at something in a judgment sense upon our lives, that we are being weighed by righteousness, by his eyes, his standard, not Rome's. Now that's a sobering thought, that we are actually being weighed up. And if you think about this in terms of honor and shame now, this gets quite interesting. How is my walk reflected before Messiah? Do we even care? Has the pride of my life superseded the reverence of Elohim? And do I know that we are going to face this? All of us are going to face this. The weight of pride. On either side of honor and shame here, you're going to see with honor will come humility and thinking about others. This is the honor, the place of honor. It's the place of servitude. Shame is pride and self. And so you're going to see one is sandwiched with humility and thinking and serving others. One is sandwiched between pride and the servitude of self. And this is going to bring shame into our lives. What drives what we do, how we act, how we treat one another, our marriages, our children, our servitude to the body? Are we doing this for self-gain, for self-worth? Do we have integrity before Elohim in these matters? Or are we actually experiencing the humility of servitude, and that is actually about others and not about self? Because there's something, honor is going to be given by the master, by the king, when this is over. We can try and view this however we want here, but ultimately this is going to be examined by the one who weighs us in the balance. The English definition of pride, a sense of one's own proper dignity or value, self-respect, self. And of course, we try to elevate that now with all these various things that we see going on in the Roman secular world. Relate to pleasure or taking an achievement, possession, or association. The English still captures arrogant and disdainful conduct, treatment, haughtiness, actually thinking that we're better than others. Humility in the English captured high respect, is shown for the special merit, recognition, or esteem, privilege, or good reputation. So this pride and humility factor that we're looking at here, often as we turn the tables on this and as our blindness seeps in, as we're seeing in Rome, pride is now becoming a good thing. Pride will come before a fall. We should take pride in all of our self-achievements, what we think, our opinions, our agendas, so on and so on. And of course, humility is fast leaving us. So what is going on then in the body sense? We're going to look at something here in Daniel 5:22-24. Now, I'm relating to this because I think we're seeing a great shadow picture of something. Now, this is concerning a kingdom, all right, as it relates to Babylon and what we're seeing go on. But there's something that's missed often before we see this writing on the wall, this kingdom, and this great example of how a kingdom is going to fall due to something. And there's something that's interested, that's mentioned in Daniel 5:22-24, which we often kind of skip over these things. But it says here, and you, his son Belshazzar, okay, so the son of Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, have not humbled. Now, this is interesting. What's going on here? Your heart. You've not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. He knew this through his father, King Nebuchadnezzar, who had gone through many things, as we see in the accounts. But you have lifted yourself up against Yah of heaven. You've not just done it in your kingdom, you're now doing it against Yah. And look at this. And the vessels of his house. Now, this is interesting because they had captured and taken the vessels of the temple, and we're actually seeing the vessels that were made of gold, things that were honorable and that were representing this great shadow picture of his righteousness and truth that actually was contained in the temple worship. Now, this is interesting. Babylon has captured this and taken this, and this is what's often missed. You have brought in before you have brought in honorable vessels before you. And look what he does with them. And your masters and your wives and your concubines have drunk from them. In other words, we are seeing here in the physical something playing out in the spiritual. And it's about to tell you that. There's this physical, spiritual shadow picture going on of honorable vessels being used in dishonorable ways. And you have praised. Now we're going to bring in the mixing of the spiritual. The gods of silver and gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but Elohim, in whose hand is your breath and whose all are your ways, you have not honored. What's being used there in the Hebrew here in this instance is the hadar, to glorify. And this is used very rarely, but this is about the honor that we are to give to Elohim. So this is interesting. What is it that we're actually seeing that's going to bring judgment upon Babylon, upon this kingdom? Now, this, I'm going to say, is going to bring this down, this great shadow picture of a kingdom. We have our personal kingdoms, our personal lives. Think of this now going into, can we experience ourselves a judgment upon our own kingdoms, the kingdoms of our lives, our little kingdoms that we make as we sit on the throne of our lives? There is something going on here where we are taking the honorable and we are desecrating it. We are desecrating that which is righteous. We are mixing. We are in spiritual adultery. There is something that has come on here, something that we got. And this is why we are to get this stuff out of the house. We are to get Mystery Babylon out of the house. We are to not partake in these things. And of course, as a part of the appointed times every year, we are to think of the week of unleavened bread. This stuff that can bring dishonor to Yah. This is when judgment comes in. We can spend time dishonoring self and others, but there is a point where we can go that we can dishonor the Father himself. And when that happens, it will bring judgment upon our lives. And so this is something that we all must be aware of, because we are playing now with that which is honorable vessels. Now, if we just think of this in terms of the shadow picture, the physical things of the temple, if that's all we do, if we just think of it in those terms and we don't think of it that the vessels, as Messiah would point out, which we're about to look at, are actually our brothers and sisters, then we can actually participate and be teaching them as a part of something that can dishonor Yah. Goes on to say in Daniel, then from his presence, the hand was sent. So judgment is going to come down now upon these actions, taking the honorable and being dishonorable with it. And therefore that dishonor has gone to the level of dishonoring the Father himself. Again, think of this great shadow picture because it's going to apply to our lives and being weighed in the balance. And this writing was inscribed. This is the interpretation of the matter. So Daniel has been brought before Belshazzar. When all was said and done and he's freaking out, he's gone to that which is righteous. And what is interesting is that they were desecrating those vessels that were honored vessels of the faith of the one that they have sought, the only one who could interpret this. So in other words, the one who was of this honorable vessel in the physical shadow picture is being brought because they were dishonoring the shadow picture of all of this, the vessels of the temple. So what is interesting here is the honorable vessel is being now brought before Belshazzar to actually give the interpretation of this. Meneh, Elohim has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought to an end Now, whether Rome understands this or not right now, it is experiencing this. It's being brought to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. This shadow picture of a great coming judgment is coming down. And what was brought on the desecration of the shadow picture of these vessels was an honorable vessel. You would know him as the prophet Daniel. The actual gold was brought to deliver the message of judgment. Just a side note here quickly on this. Something very interesting when our king was weighed in the balance. And this relates to the Hebrew Mazarot and the gospel in the heavens. We're not talking about astrology and all the weirdness that's gone on, but in previous teachings and things like this, I might go into this a bit more deeper in this upcoming Pesach messages. But basically, they looked at the heavens a certain way and the gospel being contained in them, what you'd know of in modern astrology terms and whatnot, not in Hebrew Mazarot terms, but you know it as Libra. But this is given this, the way that they viewed this part of the heavens was actually a pair of scales and balances. What is interesting at the time of Messiah's death on the ancient Tav, when that which was honored was being shamed for our sakes, he was weighed in the balance. An interesting thing is described in scripture with the sun and the moon, and they go dark. This picture of this eclipse. What is interesting is if you could view this across the world from Messiah's eyes, as the sun is being darkened, from his eyes, he is seeing something very interesting. And we, through stellarium and Copernicus mathematics and whatnot, can go back to the time of the actual death on that Pesach day, and we see in the heavens something. So these balances, these scales, well, what was occurring in the heavens? And if you think this is a coincidence, I don't. But what we actually saw at the time of Passover in 32 AD, when we go back and do this, in this actual Hebrew Mazarot, Elohim's viewing a blood red moon. And as this is occurring across the earth, if you think this is a coincidence, I just truly do not. It says the heavens declare his glory. Something was occurring. So as the world is experiencing one thing, Elohim and what he's viewing, and what he has seen in this great plan of redemption, something incredible occurred because that moon was exactly over the scales, and our Messiah was being weighed in the balance. And he was not found wanting. That is good news for all of us. Oh, the heavens do indeed declare his glory. In 2 Timothy 2, 20, 21, it says, now in a great house, Daniel was in a great house, okay? We are in a great house. There are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. Now, it's interesting, the wood and clay, there's actually references there, because this is what was used, not to be crude, but they, often used for bedpans and things like that. So you're looking at something here that's quite interesting when you get into this. We don't have time for it right now. Some for honorable use, some for dishonorable use. But they're all in the house. So you mean that we can actually be dishonorable in the house? Yes. And this is what's being expressed here in 2 Timothy. 2:21 goes on to say, therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonorable, he will be a vessel for honorable use. In other words, there's again an inference here that there is a sovereign choice on whether we are going to be in an honor position or a shame position. This is going to be something as a part of our repentance. And so we've got a part to play in this, where the sovereignty of man meets the sovereignty of Elohim. And it can relate to how he views our vessels. But in order to be an honorable vessel, we need to get some of the weightier matter in our lives. We need to get gold, this thing that is going to tip the scales back into the honor position. And our sovereignty will play a part of this. And therefore, our behavior, our character will all become a part of this. Used to be set apart, useful, now useful, servitude here to the master, ready for every good work. What's being used here is the tameh, valuing, a price that is fixed. A price is paid for this. as we go through our lives. We're going to see something interesting here. The word dishonor being used here, the antimea, to dishonor, disgrace, without honor, dishonored, shame, of less esteem. So one who cleanses himself from shame, he will be a vessel for honor. And there's going to be a price attached to this. In Revelation 3, 18, 19, now, this is one of my favorite scriptures in all of his word. And it relates, and this is being spoken about, referring to this lukewarm, this church of, this kahal of Laodicea. And something that it's saying it needs to do as a part of its overcoming process. It says, I will counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire. Now think of gold in this, and think of the terms that's being used here. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire. In other words, something that's coming for a weights and measures judgment, honor and shame judgment over our life. This lukewarm, this Laodicean existence did not seem to care about honor and shame. It did not care about the balance or how Elohim views our very walk. So that you may be rich with white garments. It's a bridal statement, by the way. So that you may clothe, look at this, yourself, and the shame, the sachune, the shame, the disgrace of your nakedness may not be seen. Look at this. And anoint your eyes that you may see. Look at this. Those whom I love, I reprove and discipline. You mean reproof and correction is directly related to receiving gold, which tips the scales from shame to honor. Think about what's going on. He's saying, get this gold from me. It's going to start shifting the balance of the judgment of your life. And the way he directly relates to this is shame is weighing it down. And honor is going to be the counteraction to this. Okay, so, Curtis, but what if I know better? Well, okay. I mean, I've many times in my life thought I knew better. Maybe none of you have, but I know I've been guilty of that. I've thought I've known better in my life. But what if I know better? Well, do we have lots of that in the body? Yes. And I'm going to say this to people. Say it to myself first, okay? So we did the look in the mirror. Responsibility, accountability, and consequence. There was a time in my life, in the fires of my life, where he was saying, Curtis, come to me. You buy gold from me. There's some shame going on in your life, and I buy this gold from me. We're going to tip the scales on this. I know you're trying to serve me, son. I know that you care. I know your faith is real. I know you're trying to love me, but I need you to actually get the real thing into your life so that you may become a vessel for honorable use. I'm going to say to people, we need to repent. We have a sovereign choice to make in how we're going to go about walking our faith out. And there are some things that just require the statement, just stop it. You must look in the mirror and make a sovereign choice. You can decide your behavior. You have the power of the Ruach, the Holy Spirit. You have the actual ability given to you to choose an honor path versus a shameful path. I have that. You have that. We all have that. But what often comes in the way, and again, we won't go into this in this series, but I've talked about this in various series about emotionally arrested development. All of us have it to some degree, and we've all experienced it. There's a part in our life where we just become arrested. We can't seem to move on. It's a certain behavior, an experience, a trauma, whatever it is. And we need to be able to heal and to move past this, because if we don't, it will create a very low emotional intelligence in that area. Now, if you're experiencing reproof, correction, discipline of any sort in an area you've not matured in, are you going to react to that honorably if you've not have a mature perspective on this, or you're going to react to it shamefully. And think of this as a child. When a child's learning what is right and wrong in the home, they tend maybe not to act so honorably when mom and dad are trying to explain something to them. Okay? Their emotional intelligence is not matured yet in this matter. Here's what's interesting. We can be in adult bodies, and if we've become emotionally arrested in a certain area of our life, if we have not matured, if we have not moved on, even though we're an adult, we can act like children. We can do that in the physical, but we also do it spiritually. And this is a result where people will hurt people. We don't actually move past, we don't receive the healings that we should. And because of this, we can't receive reproof, correction, the ability to grow, the ability to look in the mirror, because it's always someone else. And hurt people. And these people will be the ones that enter into Lashon Hara, where they will actually say things not for the reason, not for good intent, but they're saying it to lift themselves up. They're trying to weigh the balances of shame in their lives by lifting themselves up, by pointing the finger at others and everything else. And this can often lead to things like gossip, terrible social media habits, agendas, divisive opinions. These are the people that go, well, I only answer to God. I don't answer to anybody else. Yet the bread is telling us in our behavior, submit one to another. We have His Spirit, we have His Word, and we have each other. All three are going to get these scales where they need to be in discipleship. We're heading for something, and discipleship is an honor and shame existence. Regardless of what the world is doing out there, His culture is honor and shame. God told me so. I can't tell you how often I've heard this stuff. I've heard from God. I only answer God and all these kinds of things. Often these people are the ones claiming to be very spiritual. They've got so many spiritual gifts, they make Santa Claus look silly at Christmas with his big sack of presents for all the children. Because these are the biggest Santa Clauses I've ever seen spiritually. It's incredible. They are doing things that you just can't believe. Often what happens with these people is the way to lift themselves up is they will appear or try to appear very spiritual. So that could go into gifts, claims of, dealing with the demonic realm, all this kind of stuff. They're trying to actually lift themselves up so that you will see them from a place of honor. In the end, though, they are users of the brethren. They will use you for self-gain, or they will use you to achieve what they need, whether it be for self-want, self-gain, whatever it is, but it will be self-related. And we're seeing this, of course, in many aspects of the body. And it has hurt so much of the body on both our Jewish brethren, on both our Christian brethren. We are seeing this just explode. But what happens to users of the brethren is they will eventually become the accuser of the brethren. And this is how it plays out. I will not receive this. I will not look in the mirror. You don't realize that I'm the great prophet or prophetess that's been sent by God, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And eventually what will happen is they will turn upon those who are seeking an honorable walk. They will actually do this. Or they will be the ones that will cause or put shame on others who are actually acting honorably or trying to. And they'll be the ones that are actually trying to cast shame upon them. And this is what the accuser of the brethren does. So your users of the brethren are eventually going to become the accusers of the brethren. And so we need to just stop it. There's something here I do want to reflect in Tamei Tahor, and this is one of these things in Jewish religious law, which I do actually think they were relating correctly, at least in the sense of purity and trying to look at the pure and the impure and the pure in a spiritual sense, as they've tried to extract from Torah. The purity, or Tahor, is everything connected to life, hope, possibility, and growth. So this sense of cleaning the inside of the vessel. So this is reflected in these terms of Tahor. The impurity in Tamei being closed off, disconnected from life. So think of the river of life. If we're connected to the river of life, it's going to start to clean the inside of the cup. If we're disconnected from this, it is going to bring death. And so the purity laws is all about touching, if you touch a dead body and things like this. And we see this captured in various aspects of the Torah. I've got here the physical shadow picture given in Leviticus. But essentially thinking of this sort of clean and unclean way of doing our walk. Not that we're clean or unclean by our own efforts, and not that we are to call ourselves clean and unclean. We're not to use tahor and tameh concept in that way. It's more to understand being connected to the source of life or being connected to death. And one is going to bring a much cleaner walk, and one's going to bring a much more unclean walk. So the spiritual context of this does matter in this concept of thinking clean and unclean, not in the sense of making people themselves clean or unclean, because Messiah's blood now, his righteousness, is what actually is covering us, not our righteousness. But the concept of understanding what cleans us up, and in that sense with tahor and tameh, it does have merit. Mystery Babylon's influence. So we're warned of this great woman, this great whore, nothing greater than chapter 7 in the Proverbs, talking about this. But we've got this whole concept that Mystery Babylon is going to come through. Now think of the account of being weighed in the balance and what happened to Belshazzar and the Babylonian kingdom and the captivity of the people of the faith at that time. They were mixing something of these honorable vessels and bringing in this false worship, false adultery, and using these honorable vessels to do this. Now, is it possible that the ancient adversary behind Mystery Babylon will attempt to use you instead of an honorable vessel, that he may use you to bring in these Mystery Babylonian practices, these things to mix, to contaminate that which is honorable, that which is righteous? And is it possible that we've been seeing this with the history? Have we seen this in Christianity? You better believe it. It has mixed all manner of Mystery Babylon into its 30,000 plus denominations and things like this. And of course, many of us have come from this journey. And so we've come from this Christian journey. And so what has gone on with all of this stuff that we're seeing on the Christian side of the river? And then if you look at Talmudic Judaism, stunning what sits in there, and this whole mixing of the profane with the righteous. And so we're getting this sense that honor and shame is attached in our behavior to these things. Are you mean to telling me that the more that we allow Mystery Babylon, the more that we take on stuff that we shouldn't, the stuff that's been added to or taken away from the word, the more that we choose to entertain this, whether it be on the Christian side or on the Judeo side, you mean this can affect my behavior, which actually directly relates to whether I'm honorable or shameful in Elohim's eyes? Do you mean getting leaven out of the house, getting Mystery Babylon out of the house could actually affect my judgment seat? That it actually affects how an Elohim looks at me being weighed in the balance? Is the week of unleavened bread important now? Is it more than just getting the frozen bread out of the freezer? Oh, this is going to start. How about the Messianic movements? The Hebrew roots movements? Am I actually seeing, are we witnessing, if we're honest in ourselves and in others, are we actually seeing honorable behavior? Are we seeing this behavior that is humble, that has a humility, that is willing to correct and reprove, not in pride, but in humility, that is willing to serve one another, that is willing to take the lashes, that is willing to do these things that is required, to pay this price that others may get through this journey? I tell you, when I look at these movements, and notice how there's something here to offend everyone, which these kind of messages tend to do. But I'm not trying to offend anyone. It's just slandering the messenger right now is probably not the best thing. We have to look at our lives. We're actually commanded to, and it's actually a part of his framework, to cleaning the inside of the cup, to gaining the gold, to balancing the scales from shame to honor in our walk. What I am honestly seeing in so many, what I'm seeing in these Messianic and Hebrew roots movements is not honorable behavior. It's shameful. It's absolutely shameful. And our witness as a result is shameful. We want to be a witness that is honorable to him. But if we don't get this stuff out of the house, if we don't take this seriously, it's possible that it directly affects our shameful behavior. I call these STDs. Curtis, why would you describe something in such a manner? Well, it's because my Elohim does. Okay? He's the one that came up with the concept of spiritual adultery, whoring, what it is that he sees mixing the profane and the unprofane. Don't blame me. You can shoot the messenger again, but this is his analogy. Is it graphic? Yes. It's what I call spiritually transmitted diseases. And this is what we pick up. We pick this up, we pick up the traditions, the practices, the behaviors, all these sorts of things, and then we pass it on. And then we use this to keep ourselves puffed up, to keep ourselves in this shameful place. This, again, as I say, all leads to SAD. And that acronym means spiritually arrested development. See, we can have emotionally arrested development, but if we don't deal with this eventually will lead to spiritually arrested development, and this is where it's serious. This is where the scales will not change. Our actual shameful behavior will keep it weighed, and we will not receive honor as a result. We will not go about the faith in an honorable way. We must get this stuff out of the house. Think back to the weighty example of being weighed in the balances was directly related to what they were doing with the honorable vessels from the temple, and they were mixing them with their gods and creating and truly bringing this dishonoring acts to Elohim himself. Is it possible that in our spiritually arrested developments that we are bringing dishonor to the king? So this is when we see Patty the prophetess and Pat the prophet show up. It is in these behaviors. These are those who have grown in an environment that has not been honorable. It has actually been shameful. It has been contaminated with spiritually transmitted diseases. And they have learned a certain type of behavior. And this behavior has come out. And so Patty the prophetess and Pat the prophet show up, and they bring this shameful claims, behavior, acts, and what it does is it hurts people. They have not dealt with these things in their own lives. They're basically going, I know better. And they will put you to shame, that which is trying to humble itself before Elohim, that which is allowing a process to occur, because you are not listening to them. Of course, we also get Trixie and Tony, the teachers, and they are exactly the same. They are in a place of shameful behavior themselves, making themselves look also spiritual, and then putting that shame upon you, and then teaching that shame that you will carry it on, that same behavior. Or actually not allow you, in fact, in some cases, create the very stumbling blocks which don't allow you to come before Messiah, which of course has grave warnings in the New Testament, that if we are the ones to do this, that we are casting the stumbling blocks before those who are actually trying to go through the process. Serious warnings. We see here recorded in Matthew 7, 12, 13. Now this is interesting. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law, the Torah, and the prophets. Interesting. This is what our King says. Enter by the narrow gate, not this wide path of shame. this narrow path of honor. For the gate is wide, which is easy, that leads to destruction. Those who enter by it are many. This is speaking about believers. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just make this Rome? You could just say, oh, this is talking about the people on the news. This is to believers for believers. Very interesting. The narrow gate. Do you know what's actually being stated here in this narrow, this straight? It just seems, pretty straightforward in the English. But it says to make stand, to place, this histeme, in the presence of others, in the midst. Now, this is interesting. Again, think about what the great shadow picture of these vessels in the actual temple worship were. Now think about what it points to, which is actually his people. Now think about this actually being us who stand in this place, in the midst, before judges. He's making us firm and fixed in a certain place, but it's in this narrow place. Goes on to say, for the gate is narrow. Now, again, in the English, it's just narrow, but in the Greek, it's going to give us something a little bit deeper here. Even though it's been translated as narrow, again, in the English, it's not saying the same thing. Now we're in Thlibo. For the gate is pressing, will press hard upon, to compress, contracted, to afflict, to distress. Isn't this interesting? A price. We're not going to see this in the English. For the gate is a price, is a pressing. Think of the great harvest of the fall feast. It's the grape harvest, the crushing, the olives, the crushing. You mean we're going to pay a price for this honor? And the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. We won't accept this bit. We like the good bits. We like the honey. We don't like this part of the meal. Now look at this. Directly, so the antecedent to this statement I'm about to make is directly relating to those who will take a certain type of path that will lead to shame, and those who will take a certain type of path that will lead to honor. Beware of the false prophets. Pat and Patty, Tony and Trixie. If anybody here is Pat and Patty and Tony and Trixie, I'm not actually speaking to you or having a go at those names. These are just euphemisms to make a point, okay? Don't be offended if those are your names. It's not an attack on you. Look at this. Who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Now, wolves are a very interesting creature in the creation picture, because wolves are an animal in the wild that take. They actually don't give to their environment. They will just hunt down and take. And so these false prophets, these false teachers and whatnot, they will take. It is self. Whether that be self-worth, self-gain, self-reputation, building up oneself, they are going to take this seat at the expense of those who are not. So how can I know who these false teachers and prophets are? Why does this matter in discipleship? Well, you got a choice. Do you want to be discipled by Patty and Pat, and Tony and Trixie? Do you want to be discipled by that which is ravenous and is only here to take? Is that who you want to walk with? Do you want to go down that path of shame? Those who know better, causing strife and dissension? Who do you want to walk with? To this statement, I say, show me your fruit. Everybody claims that. And if you don't know someone, if you don't actually walk with someone, you might actually believe the advertisement. Has anybody ever gone to a restaurant, and you see all those beautiful pictures of the meal, and then you're actually at the restaurant and they put the same meal in front of you, and it's like, this doesn't look anything like the picture. Okay, the difference between the picture and you being at the restaurant is called intimacy. One is looking at the picture, the other is sitting down for the meal and actually seeing what it is. This is where discipleship is going to come in, an understanding of honor and shame. In my experience, what I have seen over the years is many claims for the picture that you see on my left, and the picture on my right is what really is. And the only difference between you or I knowing that in another brother or sister's life is whether they will walk with you and you with them. One is attached to honor, one is attached to shame. Which one do we want to eat of? And if this picture is going to change for our lives, I know if this picture was going to change for my life, I needed to look in the mirror. I needed to actually look at Thlibo, what the narrow gate really was. I had to allow this reproof, this correction for those whom he loved to come upon my life so that the fruit could change. Matthew 7, 16, 18. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or from figs and thistles? Do you actually gather from these things? Think of this whole parable, where the weeds come in and choke out those who have received the faith. So every healthy tree bears good fruit. Every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. Now here's what's interesting. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. What is it that is in our lives that is choking out our walk? What is it that we're not allowing? What is tipping the scales to a shameful behavior that it ultimately is bearing bad fruit, regardless of our justifications and our claims? How will I actually know whether I'm dealing with a false teacher or prophet? If you don't actually walk with them, if you don't actually spend that time, if you don't actually participate in a body that values and understands discipleship, you could be fooled by these false prophets and teachers. It goes on to say, every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire, found wanting the judgment. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. I want to say to you that it is almost next to impossible without a discipleship journey for you to know what the fruit of someone's life actually is. Now, don't feel bad or guilty because we've had things go wrong in our life or things that have happened. This is about actually knowing things happen, bad things happen in our lives. The Father could allow even a trial, a travail, something to go on that is beyond our control. But these are the things within our control. These are the things that relate to our marriage, to our children, to our servitude. These are the things that we can actually affect the sovereign choices on, not whether we've lost our job or whether we had an avalanche, sweep the house away or something like that. These aren't bad things happening. Life throws challenges and things our way. We're talking about the things that our sovereign choice is involved in, that relate directly to our behavior, that relate directly to whether we are acting in an honorable or shameful way. towards others, from the marriage right through to the wider body and everything in between. It's impossible to know someone's fruits unless you're in this pattern of discipleship. But the good news is, apparently we can make the choice to buy gold from him, tip the scales, and we can go from dishonorable to honorable. I know in my walk, I've known the dishonorable vessel. But I don't want to spend my time there. I see a king that paid the price, who wasn't found wanting, that has given me a chance to clean the inside of the cup, to put this gold on the scales, and to take this from shame to honor. And that is a choice that we can all make. We've all maybe spent time as dishonorable vessels. The choice is, do you want to continue to? In 2 Timothy 3:1-5, I wish we could blame Rome for this, very famous passage. What is interesting, and people often miss in this passage, is not only is this not about Rome, this is talking about the body. Again, but understand this, in the last days, they will come. So the last days, the last 2 days of this great plan of redemption, what's going to come into the body is difficulty. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable. Look at this, slanderous. Well, it's interesting here, slanderous. The Greek is diablos. So you get diablo, hasatan, the devil. You mean this is the act of the accuser of the brethren? Just tucked away nicely in there, slanderous, accusing falsely, false accuser, slanderer, to defame, dishonor, coming from prideful, opposing the cause of Elohim, to side with the adversary. Wow. They are without self-control, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen, conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of Elohim, having the appearance, look at this, of godliness. This is the believers. They have the appearance of this, but they're denying the power of the Ruach in their lives to tip the scales, to change, or to clean the inside of the cup. They are hanging on to this stuff. They are appearing to be spiritual. I tell you, when you see slander going on in the body towards a brother or sister, and you don't have an intimate understanding of them or the person they're talking about, but they're willing to just slander. And I'm talking about an individual. And you see this kind of behavior going on in the body. I'm not talking about calling out bad behavior. We're just talking about throwing something out there at someone else's expense for self-gain and slandering because they don't agree with you or have a different opinion or do something the way you don't. So I'm going to slander them. Oh boy, do I see it on social media with so-called believers. It's just staggering. By the way, the Greeks got it pretty well here. It's accuser of the brethren stuff. Diablos. It's directly related, this action, to Hasatan. 2 Timothy 3:6-7 says this, for among them are those who creep into households. Look at this. Look who the target is, right back at the garden. Capture weak women. Or read that as less mature in the faith. Burdened with missing the mark and led astray with various desires. This is playing on the design aspect, the emotional design aspect that's contained within the woman. Always learning and never able to arrive at the knowledge of the truth. Look at this. From among them, from among the households are those that are going to creep in. By the way, the context of this is not just speaking about men. Often people think this. From among them are those who creep into households to capture, because the target are women, they think, oh, it must be just men doing this. No. Patty the prophetess is as much involved in this as Pat the prophet. And in fact, I would actually say what I've witnessed in the body over the years, I've seen more women do this to other women than I have seen men do. That should be very sobering. Some of the greatest damage that I've witnessed over the years, decades, within the so-called believing body has actually come from women doing this to women. How do we avoid this? Do we avoid it by just what? Muzzling all the women in a community and we'll tape all their mouths up? Is that how we're to do it? No. Do the women not have value in sharing and teaching and bringing that line of sight? No, we're going to talk about this over this series. But there's ways and things for us to understand, to take very seriously in Scripture. We are dealing with a design matter. No matter how much Rome may want to disregard the design, our Elohim changes not, and he does not. All of this will relate to design. I speak about this in the design of men and women. But just understand the target has been a certain portion of the design of a man and woman, and this one particularly is the one that will take on certain things. And there's a reason for that. We'll speak about that a bit more next week. But just note here to point out, Patty the prophetess is coming after vulnerable women as much as Pat is. So discipline is love. According to Elohim, our creator, it is. My son, do not despise Yah's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For Yah reproves him who he loves, as a father, the son in whom he delights. He relates this to us as sons. We're sons and daughters of the promise? Interesting. You mean that if he loves us, he'll actually discipline us? So we're actually going to experience reproof and correction as a part of our walk in the faith? You mean that which loves us will actually do that? Yes. It's a part of his way. It's necessary so that we may go through the thlebo, the narrow gate. Love will get us through that gate. His love. In the Proverbs 3:13-14 puts it like this: blessed is the one who finds wisdom. Oh, how precious she is. And the one who gets understanding. Or the gain from her is better than silver. And look at this, and profit better than the gold. You mean this whole shadow picture of the gold, that this wisdom, that this going through this process is actually greater than the shadow picture that's been trying to be expressed here. In Hebrews 12:5-7 says, and you have forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons. Think about what we read there earlier. My son, he delights in. What do you think he's referring to here? Proverbs 3. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of Yah, nor be weary when reproved by him. For Yah disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. This is not some magical, ethereal process. He's not running a house of chaos. Do you know that Yah brings his reproof and discipline through parents, through spouses, through servants in the body? How do you think he administers this? What is discipleship? And how important is this in matters of honor and shame in our walk? Look at this. It is for discipline. So discipleship is the disciplined ones. Interesting. Not just in their actions being disciplined, but they're actually willing to be disciplined. This is interesting. It is for the discipline that you have to endure. Wow. Elohim is treating, look at this, you as sons. For what son is there who his father does not discipline? In fact, could we consider ourselves sons of Elohim at all if we didn't experience it? Do you know one of the healthiest environments that we can experience discipline in, the most loving environments, the most effective environments, the greatest environments we could ever experience that in, is this whole pattern of discipleship? Being raised by loving parents who are willing to discipline, having a loving spouse who is willing to discipline in the covenant relationship, to have brothers and sisters who are willing to be a part of a process of submitting one to another, receiving and giving reproof and correction. Wow. Goes on to say, if you are left without discipline, in which all, look at this, which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. You ate the honey, nothing but the honey, and we sought to glorify ourselves. We would not go through this process. We would not have the scales tipped and receive the gold and the honor that would outweigh the shame. Besides this, we have earthly fathers who disciplined us, the shadow picture. And we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? Wow. You mean this is the weightier matter? Actually receiving this correction, this spiritual discipline in our lives, that we may actually not be found wanting. For they disciplined us for a short time. So again, using the shadow picture of the parents, as it seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his set apartness. Wow. That's a statement, by the way, of bridal governance. Just so you know, that we may share in his set apart. There's something coming. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. Fair enough. But later it yields, look at this, the peaceful fruit. You'll know them by their fruit. Do you see how this is all connecting in? You will know them by something. This peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been, look at this, trained by it, discipled by it. How are we supposed to deal with bad behavior within the body then? So when we see this amongst ourselves, we're a community here at River Branch. We're trying to go, how can we be honorable to Elohim, to the King, to the Master, not shameful? We have to figure this out as a community. Does everybody agree? Like, if we're a community of believers and we're representing the King, then these things matter. In fact, our behavior matters. In fact, I'll go as far as to say the behavior here is how we treat one another. Because if we're growing in Messiah, our bad behavior is to Messiah, or our shameful behaviors to a Messiah, or our honorable behavior to Messiah. Do you see what's happening? We are already experiencing judgment. It's happening right now. If this is Messiah in someone else that you are acting in a shameful manner towards, you're acting shameful towards Messiah. You're willing to. There is no reverence. There is no fear of Elohim. Should you be honorable, humble in serving others? And humility doesn't mean you're being nice and weak and, that kind of a thing. Moshe was considered one of the most humble. I can assure you that the sons of Korah didn't think he was humble by today's standards. Humility's got nothing to do with telling it like it is, or saying what needs to be said, or doing what needs to be done. That is not what defines humility. Humility is knowing your brother or your sister and what's truly going on in the heart and what is driving them. Is it honorable or is it shameful? Is it self or is it others? If you're only going to judge this by the context of what makes you feel good or doesn't, then you're going to slander. And you could end up slandering that which is actually in an honorable place and is actually trying to help you and to love you. How horrible a thing it is when parents are trying to do the right thing and the children are screaming at them, "You don't love me. You don't love me." Because their definition and their understanding of love just isn't mature. No parent wants to hear from a child that the child is making such an accusation about them. Or how about when the child says, "I don't love you. You don't give me enough honey." No parent wants to face that or enjoys that. But a parent who loves their children will endure it for their sake. In 2 Thessalonians 3:11-12, "For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, the arektos, undisciplined." Look at this. That walk. Now, idleness, we get all sorts of connotations in English, don't we? Undisciplined, disorderly. Look at this. Out of ranks, irregular, inordinate, deviating from the prescribed order or rule. Is he running a house of chaos? No. To place in certain order, to arrange, to assign, to appoint, look at this, on one's own responsibility or authority, to appoint mutually. In other words, there's some among you that are among you that walk in a chaotic, disorderly manner according to the house of Israel. You don't care. And as a result, you become but busybodies. What do we got here? Yeah. The periagadzomai, to bustle about uselessly, to busy oneself about trifling, needless, meddling. Wow. I don't care how this house is run, and all I care about is commenting, being, acting, doing things I should not be doing. I don't care how his house is run. I do it my way. Now, such persons we command and encourage, look at this, in the Master Yeshua Messiah, to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. In other words, do what you got to do. Stay quiet. Do your thing. You are not ready to serve and to be in this place at this level, to actually take on which is honorable and to not do that which is shameful. And by the way, age and knowledge has nothing to do with any of this. Some of the most shameful behavior that I see in the body, unfortunately, is coming from people that have gray hairs. And they've spent their whole life mixing the profane with the righteous. Oh, yes, they might have knowledge. They might have years of claiming that they've had a faith in God, but that nowhere makes them healthy. And nowhere makes the fruit of their life good. Show me your fruit. You want to tell me who you are, brother or sister? You want to make these claims to me? Okay. I'm not going to disregard that either way. But who are you? Let me see the fruit of your life. Tell me about the discipleship in your life. Do you know how many people that Michael and I can have come to us and, they know the mysteries of the universe, or they got something, or something we need to hear and say and whatnot, and that's fine. We like hearing certain things. That's all you need to listen. You're not this, you're not doing, and it's interesting. I'm going, man, you don't even know who we are. Yet you're willing to comment as if you do. You think you've watched some teaching, a couple of teachings, and you have a concept of who Michael is, who I am, who our wives are, who the body is, who our community is. And you dare put something like that on social media or write a letter with such ignorance? You've never sought to walk to know me, yet you have no problem to slander. Wow. Imagine being in that place, that much pride, that you actually think that you know nothing about this person, but you're the one called by God to slander the body. Well, you're not called by the Elohim. You might be called by the God of this world, Diablos. This is scary stuff. 2 Thessalonians 3:13-15. As for you, brothers, do not grow weary. In doing so, do good. If anyone does not obey what we say in this letter, take note, that person and have nothing to do with him, that he may be ashamed, put to shame. Do not regard him as an enemy, though, but warn him as a brother or a sister. This is in the context of an honor and shame culture within the house, vessels of honor and vessels of dishonor. Matters of personal offense, we've talked about this at length. This is regarding personal offense. If a brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault or her fault between you and him alone. Not slander, not social media, not everybody around. Go to them if there's a true offense that is sitting inside your heart. In most cases I see with brothers and sisters, they don't mean to offend another. That doesn't mean they haven't offended you. And in a lot of cases, the offended is not necessarily even correct. So you need to go to them and them alone. Do this honorably, not shamefully. If he listens to you, or if she listens to you, you have gained your brother or sister. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge or what you see as an offense may be established now by evidence. So now the person who is offended has the responsibility all on them. Think about responsibility, accountability, consequence. They are required to go to the person that offended them. They're now required to go, if they don't listen, to now make themselves accountable with others and to present the evidence that their offense has merit. Even. Who's the responsibility on here? The offender or the offended? The offended. Interesting. You mean we could emotionally react in a way that's shameful? Has anybody ever reacted to reproof and correction shamefully? That's never happened to any of you. I know it's only happened to me, but when you experience it, it's not fun. Okay? I have reacted shamefully to something. And in the process of trying to do something honorably, I was able to be restored to honor. Do you see what could happen? I could emotionally react to something shamefully, but then go about doing it in an honorable way and be restored back to the honorable position. This is what this is allowing under personal offense. It's on the offended. If they refuse to listen at that point, and now we have the evidence and the witnesses, tell the wider assembly and let them as a Gentile and as a tax collector. In other words, treat them as such. You know, a Gentile and tax collector is that which is outside the house. You often didn't invite the tax collector in ancient times into your house to eat a meal. Okay, this was not something you did. They were despised because of the bondage, and they would go about on behalf of what your captors had, and they would take from you in your labors, unfairly, unjustly. A lot of our world leaders today need to understand this, but they don't. And this is what happens. You're treating them essentially as if they're outside the house at that point. This is matters of personal offense. Often people start taking things out of context and trying to apply Matthew 18 to something that is a matter of body of Messiah offense. This is a very different process. Now, this has gone beyond something that is affecting or whether someone's personally offended, be it justly or unjustly. Just because you're offended doesn't mean that suddenly the other person is at fault. Just means you're experiencing offense, and that's why you deal with personal offense. Body offense is another matter, and we see this captured in Titus 3:9-11. This is one of the most difficult things, by the way, this one, as a servant leader, because every now and then, as servant leaders, if you're given a responsibility of overseeing at any capacity, whether, and again, parents will understand this in the home and everything else, they get to such a level, they generally don't experience this very serious levels at the teenage years or the young adult years. But as a servant leader in the body, this is one of the most difficult to ever contend with, because now you're facing something where someone is basically become unreasoning. They're like a beast, a wild animal. They are so caught up in the shame, they will not hear something. And this is something that, albeit rare, when it does happen, it is one of the hardest things to ever experience. But this is one of the most serious things I'm about to say regarding this whole honor and shame. As servant leaders, from time to time, we are faced with someone who will not repent. And as a part of somebody not repenting, and that starts to affect the body, because they are not willing. They're going to step out of rank. They're going to step out of being a body. They're going to disregard that which is serving. They are going to know better. I know better. And as a result, actually start to hurt the body, whether they see it or not, or understand it or not. This forces overseen to have to act. This is captured in Titus 3:9-11, but I want to tell you how serious this gets here. Not only is this should be a rare matter, but it should be one that any servant leader that wishes to execute what's recorded here in 3:9-11 in a flippant manner, or in a manner that does not have a heavy heart and is doing everything it can to preserve that person and to turn them back to Elohim and to their brothers and sisters, that servant leader should not be in servant leadership. This is one of the most grievous things to ever experience in serving in the body of Messiah. We should be loving and doing everything we can to avoid this. But sometimes there are people that will not stop. They can't. They're not overcoming. They don't fear Elohim, and they do not care about hurting the body. But avoid the foolish controversies. Now, this is the antecedent of this, by the way. So the statement coming up to this: avoid foolish controversies, genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels about the Torah, for they are unprofitable and worthless. If I described a lot of what I'm seeing in the religious movements, I know I can say this for modern Judaism and Christianity, but boy, oh boy, in Messianic movements in the Hebrew roots, look at this: avoid foolish controversies, genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels about the Torah. Wow. Boy, could I ever say that right now to vast portions of the body. We don't want to be saying that about this in River Branch in our community. We don't want to be seen to be doing or having to be reminded of this. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Reject a person who stirs up division or strife. So the antecedent of this is these are going to be people that are not avoiding controversies, genealogies, quarrels about the Torah. These are people that are going to be well and truly engaged in this. Avoid a person who stirs up division and strife. Afterwards, warning them once, then twice. So give them one warning, 2 warnings. Stop it. Just stop it. You are hurting others. You may not care that it's hurting you, and that the scales and your balanced position before Elohim is now weighed in shameful behavior. You may not care about that, but you're now hurting others. And you're now bringing shame upon them who are trying to be honorable. This is a position now that we unfortunately have to deal with. You are not going to be allowed to do that in this community. Why? Because not our people. They're his. And it's his house, not our house. This will not be allowed to continue. This is how serious it gets. Knowing that such a person is warped and missing the mark. They are self-condemned. This is katatrino. They're actually choosing to act shamefully. And they are actually condemning themselves and their own judgment by continuing to do this. The word reject here in the English is very interesting. The pararatama in the Greek. This is where it gets really interesting. Reject a person. Well, you'd think, okay, well, reject them, kick them out. Oh, it's greater than that. To ask, to beg, to have no one, to obtain, to entreaty, to ask for, so they entreat. Stop it. Seek to adverse, to refuse, to decline, to shun, to beg, to pardon, excuse. In other words, allow discipleship every chance to turn this person around and to tip the scales the other way. The inference here is it's one excusing themselves. In other words, this isn't happening because of us, brother or sister. It is happening because of your actions, your pride, your willingness to continue doing something that is against this wider gathering. This is interesting. Not accepting them as a wedding invitation to a feast. Now let's think back to some things that we read in the Brit Hadashah. People who are not allowed into the wedding feast, that which is removed from the wedding feast. Do you know what this is actually saying? You're to treat them as if they're not invited to it. My goodness. Remove them from the house. They're going to miss the wedding. My bride will not act this way. Is that sobering to anyone? So we're going to try and do everything we can to avoid Titus 3:9-11, right? We want to be a community that doesn't have to live in this space. So as a result of all this, we have the blind leading the blind in his body. And we have to contend with this now from a wider community perspective, from teaching, from things. And look, most things that we see going on in a wider body sense, and even in our community in River Branch, most things are done with good intent. But good intention, like I say, if we could do this in good intention, we wouldn't need his word and we wouldn't need the Ruach, would we? We just need our good intent. We're going to talk about this next week, why we do what we do and how important this is, because it directly relates to honor and shame and our very judgment seat before Messiah. It wasn't all our bad behavior in Rome and our struggles in the flesh. Our judgment seat is directly related to how we walk the faith. Not how much we know about it, not how much we can just proclaim or tick our boxes, how we apply it. Wow. No wonder so much of what we see the early Kahal was dealing with. No wonder when we went through the book of 1 Timothy that it was dealing with behavior. The blind leading the blind. Do we have this happening in the body today? Oh, you better believe it. Why? Because Patty the prophetess and Pat the prophet are here. Trixie the teacher and Tony the teacher are here. And they're operating in a shameful manner. They do not care that this is not their house. It's his. That's not their people. They're his. Matthew 15:10-12. This is really interesting because Yeshua doesn't do this often, and he's speaking to the people, but he does something here, which is very interesting. And he called to the people and said to them, so he's now going to make the point. This is something he didn't normally do. Hear and understand. He's making a point on this one. Hear and understand. And the Pharisees are present. He wants them to hear. He wants the religious leaders to know that not only those around them are hearing, he wants them to know that they've heard. He is doing something very offensive here. If you're in a shameful place in the scales. And they were offended. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but is what comes out of the mouth that defiles a person. Our bad behavior. Then the disciples came and said to him, do you know the Pharisees were offended when they heard you saying this? Well, the point is Yeshua did that intentionally. Oh, I want them to hear this. He answered, every plant that my heavenly Father, what has not planted, will be rooted up. So you plant yourself in this place of honor. You put yourself, you do this, you draw disciples after yourselves. If this is the place you want to go, he's going to root you up. Think of a shadow picture of our own little kingdoms and being found wanting. You want to go against the actual house? Let them alone. They are blind guides. And if blind lead the blind, they both fall into a pit. And often from an overseeing or servant leading position, we watch and see certain things going on. And they go, why don't you stop it? Stop them from doing this. And I go, no, I want to see who they take with them. I want to see if they'll entertain this behavior. Because sifting and pruning is his way, and he uses the adversarial position to do it. He's using the adversary to sift the very bride of Messiah. And we're going to talk about this. A wisdom has to be applied here on that which would serve. But boy, do we have the blind leading the blind right across the religious movement. So how do we avoid all this pride and shame behavior within the River Branch community? We're going to talk about that next week. And we're going to look at how we, as a community, seek, albeit our modern expression, albeit scattered, how do we seek to take discipleship principles and live them, do them as a community in an honorable way and not a shameful way in the eyes of Elohim, who holds the balances, the scales of the judgment of our servitude, of our walk, our faith in his hands. That we're actually going to stand before the judgment seat, because there's an amazing reason why. There's an exciting reason why. It's incredible where this is going. And we want to do everything we can as a River Branch community to love and to serve and to submit into one another. But it's not a house of chaos. And we don't do things for no reason. And for those who may not want to respect why we do that, may not want to understand, may not know the importance of these things, they have the sovereign right to be in that place. And maybe then, as a part of that realization themselves, maybe this is not the community for them. Maybe they know better and should just go somewhere else. None of us claim to know better. We're trying to do better. We're trying to be pleasing. We need to learn how to submit to the King and to learn how he wishes to run his house, and that we may be on the honorable side of these scales, not the shameful side, that what we do as a community will not be found wanting. Amen? Okay, let's finish there and we'll come back for the Q&A here shortly.